This program was brought to you by Organo Gold. Organo Gold is a health and wellness company that provides healthy coffees, teas, and chocolate. All one has to do is consume the available coffee, teas, chocolate, and other products to get all the available benefits. One can also share these products with others to help them improve their health as well.
And now, Fairfax Breakfast Club with your host, Besile Lemba.
Welcome to the Fairfax Breakfast Club show. My name is Besile Lemba and I will be your host. The Fairfax Breakfast Club is a weekly program in which we bring to you valuable and workable know-how you can use to improve your networking skills and grow your business. We always start a show with a quote, and today's quote is, "Business must be run at a profit, else it will die." But when anyone tries to run a business solely for profit, then the business must die as well, for it no longer has reason for existence. And that is from the highly famous Henry Ford. With us today in the studio, we have someone who helps businesses do just that. He's a consultant advising government contractors as well as regular businesses as to how to properly and safely run the business. He has been a CPA for 30 years, has been also a business coach for many more years. So I would like to say hello to our consultant, Charles. Hello, Charles.
Hi, Besile.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Very good, very good.
Good.
Now, let me start by saying you have several businesses, but today you're going to talk about a very specific business, which is Strategic FAR Advisors, where you help people working with government.
Yes.
Okay, tell us how the idea of strategic FAR advisement came to be. FAR advisor came to be.
Well, I've been involved in government contracting for 38 years.
Mm-hmm.
So,
let's say CPA, but 30 years. More.
CPA many of those years,
Okay.
but I worked for the federal government, and then I left the federal government. I became a chief financial officer in a company, and I was dealing with government contractors. So one of the things that had evolved over those years was that there was a tremendous lack of knowledge that was available to small and mid-sized companies. So they were relying on their CPAs who were doing taxes or doing financial statements to give them advice on government contracting. And that wasn't really the safest thing to do. So, the idea is that we were looking to help those small and mid-sized companies deal with all those issues that they have in government contracts. And I think I have a slide that talks about our motto, and on that slide it says, solving the puzzle of government contracting.
Gotcha.
Okay, and that's what we do. What we do is we take all those puzzling different laws and regulations, and we help companies work through them, and that will help them become a profitable government contractor.
It's not the same thing as I would say in the private sector because of the rules and regulation, I may say, that exist in the arena. Can you tell us a little bit, kind of like, I believe you have a slides on the graph on that?
Yeah. Well, it's different because the government is a unique type of customer, and it has specific rules and regulations. The word FAR in our name, Strategic FAR Advisors, really stands for Federal Acquisition Regulation.
Gotcha.
That's what the FAR stands for. So what we're trying to do is take a strategic approach for the small and mid-sized companies so that they can approach their government markets, understand what those markets are, how to get in them, how to do them successfully, and then to perform successfully and become successful government contractors. And as you can see on the slide, I have a slide that shows a company, and that company becomes interested in doing government contracts. Now, it can find a lot of different vehicles for doing government contracts. One, it can be looking at GSA commercial sales.
Right.
So a lot of people are out there selling, we'll get you on a GSA schedule. Okay, you have a lot of.
Can you tell us what GSA means for those who do not know what it is?
General Services Administration.
Okay, very good.
And they have what they call federal supply schedules. And what it is commercial companies come to them, and they are allowed to get onto various announcements. They have these announcements. There's different categories.
Okay.
And you find the one that you fit into, and then you get onto that, and you get the GSA will then qualify you as a commercial vendor. They look at your history and they look at some other things, see that you actually offer these things to commercial companies, and then they negotiate rates with you.
Okay.
Now, the thing is that's one way to get into government contract. A lot of people say, oh, we can get you onto the government, the GSA schedule. Mm-hmm. But that's just the beginning part. That's just the very, very beginning. There's other ways to get in government contracts too. For example, you can be a subcontractor to a prime contractor.
That's right.
Okay,
That's right.
So there are a lot of government, prime contractors are very large. Mm-hmm. Each one of them has a subcontracting plan.
Gotcha.
Okay, that subcontracting plan requires them to subcontract with small and various types of businesses, small businesses like minority-owned businesses or women-owned businesses, and the government tries to keep track of that and keeps the statistics on that, on how much they do. So, so they have opportunities. If you have someone that works or needs your services that's a prime contractor, you can try to start getting on board as a subcontractor to a government contract, and that gives you some past performance experience, which you really need in order to be successful in government contracting. The third is to be the prime contractor. The government in recent years has kept increasing the percentage of awards that are going to small businesses. Mm-hmm. So in doing that, you have an opportunity to become a prime contractor, but that's where it gets a little bit a little bit less certain, because there's so many things that you have to deal with the government, and sometimes that's not the best way to start. So you choose one of the ways that you want to start. You say, mm-hmm. Do I really want to do this? And then mm-hmm. the question becomes, what does that mean? Well, all these are entrees. For example, getting on the GSA schedule in and of itself does not get you, though it's a contract, it doesn't get you any work. Mm-hmm. You actually have to go and solicit to various agencies mm-hmm. and see, beating on doors and tracking down various people and seeing who has a need, and where can you offer some work. Okay. And there's various ways you can find that out. There's the government publishes, USA Spending, FESBIT Ops, some of these other sites. You can actually do research and find out who's ordered what you provide, your product or service.
Got it.
So that's the very start. But in that slide you can see there's a bunch of arrows coming out of this, and then and the reason to have those arrows is because there's so many laws and regulations that affect government contractors. Now, so if you're doing a GSA schedule, you kind of look down there. There's still some things you have to be aware of. For example, there's still some socioeconomic clauses. There's still some environmental clauses in your contracts. These are things that even though you're commercial, you have these requirements. For example, one of them that comes to mind is the Buy American Act. So if you're a producer, you're a manufacturer, you're producing something that's being sold as a commercial item to a government contractor, that's possible because, for example, there's military vehicles. Mm-hmm. Well, there are things that go on commercial vehicles that also go on military vehicles. Those items, the military producers, the government contractors, they don't go out and have them specially made. You just get the commercial ones and say they use those because they're perfectly adequate.
Got it.
But at the same time, when you sign a contract with that government contractor, even though you're a commercial contractor, you're going to get some clauses that are going to flow down to you. Not very many, but still a few clauses that you have to make sure you're doing something to comply with.
Now, clauses could be like you cannot sell this to a foreign country.
Right. There might be somebody on, for example, I would do an extreme case. If you had somehow you got product that was being produced in, North
Korea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then you would not be able to use that because there's restrictions. But it's a lot more liberal than it used to be. But you have to have somebody who kind of understands what those ropes are, what you need to be making sure you're doing.
Okay.
Then if you go to just a subcontractor with a prime contractor, basically they're going to flow down clauses to you that are government contract clauses required by the Federal Acquisition Regulation. Mm-hmm. And depending on what their contract is, that's what they're going to flow down to you. They're going to flow down what they need to flow down to you.
Got it.
And you don't know from there, you have to find out who the government contractor is, what they're doing, and how you fit into the scheme of things, how you're going to get your share of work. There's a lot of small businesses that will invest a lot of time helping a larger business with a proposal because of an expertise they have, and not necessarily get any work out of that. So you really have to be careful with who you're dealing with, even as a prime contractor. Most prime contractors are very reputable, but there are some that are going to try to use you. You just have to understand that. You want to make sure that you get the work. Now, if you're going in as a prime contract, you can get your work still awarded on a competitive basis, like a sealed bid. And so that's where you go down, but you look at all these lines and they're going down, and so you have cost accounting and auditing of your data. So these are things that you have to deal with as both a subcontractor and as a prime contractor, and even under a GSA schedule. They have a right to come in and look at data that you've presented and make sure that you've given them current, accurate, and complete data, and that data has been consistent over the period of their contract. Good. But there are more and more requirements that get laid onto government contractors. The more detailed you go, the highest level of compliance is required of government contractors that do cost type work. So if you're doing cost type work, you're basically opening up your company to an examination of your books and records by a government agency or an authorized representative of the government.
Got it. Okay.
So just to give a kind of a overview of just some of the laws and regulations, and one of the things that's very unique about government contractors that's not true in the commercial field is that there are actually laws and regulations that you have to deal with even before you have a government contract. Okay. Now, some of these that have to do with bidding government contracts. Normally when you're in a commercial company, you're not dealing with the government. You have a lot of flexibility to talk to people within the company, find out what's going on, find out who your competition is if they're willing to share that information. There's nothing that's in any way inappropriate or sensitive about that data. With a lot of government contractors, though, because of the way the government contracts, they give away a lot of very sensitive data. And so they don't really want all that data being shown. And so you have some things. There's the Procurement Integrity Act, which came up several years ago because of data that was being shared by government officials with other companies, competitors. And I think, I don't know that they necessarily were thinking there should be anything wrong with that. But what it did is it really tainted the procurement process, and it allowed somebody to get a competitive advantage that they shouldn't have had. And it helped them in two different ways. One reason they have the procurement integrity is that the government should not be telling, company A what company B's price is. There's two reasons for that. Because one, company A could then lower its price to be slightly lower than company B. Or it actually might raise its price to be slightly lower than company B. So it's not necessarily getting good competition by disclosing information like that. The second thing is it's very sensitive because a lot of this is proprietary data, and they don't, company A and B do not want each other to know what their pricing is, their costing is. And so there are a lot of very severe penalties for violating that particular law. But up to that time, it's very similar. You need to be in contact with the people in the government or the prime contractor. You need to be talking to their technical people. You need to be finding out how you can be of service to them. But the thing that really becomes different with a government contract is you have to go through the bidding process. And that bidding process is a very public process. So everybody has, they issue an RFP. You get a request for a proposal. That proposal then you have to respond to, normally within 30 or 60 days. You turn it around and you have to give them information, and that information becomes very sensitive. Once that process starts, once the request for a proposal is issued, the Procurement Integrity Act really kicks in, and that's where you have to be very careful when you're dealing with your government officials. You don't want to get any information you're not really entitled to. But once you have that bidding process, then you also are subject to something called the Truth in Negotiations Act. Now that comes into play only when it's a negotiated bid. And so there's all types of restriction. The government is trying to get adequate price competition. It doesn't apply in those cases where there's adequate price competition. But there are cases where you're going to be giving them information, and then you're going to have to certify that information. And you're certifying that information is current, accurate, and complete. And then that kicks in another law, which is the false statements law. So you have, when you're dealing with, on this slide, it shows, FAR Part 12. Well, that's commercial contracting. That's the rules governing commercial contracting. Part 15 is the ones covering negotiated bids and how the government goes out and gets bids. So they're trying to get competition. It talks about a lot of these things. Some of the things, the system for award management, you have to register. You can't even be a government contractor if you haven't done that. That's part of the sales and bidding process. And then there's also all these set-aside programs that you can apply for. And you can get into those two ways. One is you can be self-certified for certain types of, for example, small business, you're a small business. There's rules and guidelines about what that means, but you can certify it. But there's other ones that are more formal, like the 8A program. You have to actually apply for the 8A program and be approved by the Small Business Administration. Okay. Then we go over to awarded performance. And then there's other things. Now you have a contract. Now you're billing the government. And all these other laws start coming into play. And the difference between the government and a commercial contract is when you have a government contract, basically when you breach that contract, you're generally in violation of a law, okay, which there could be administrative or criminal penalties to. So some of those were the False Claims Act, False Statements Act. You have FAR Part 3, which talks about business practices. You need to have that in place. Part 16 is the types of contracts that you can get and what that means. Part 31 talks about the cost accounting and the requirements that you have for excluding things called unallowable expenses, basically the expenses the government doesn't want to pay for.
Gotcha.
And then there's the cost accounting standards, which basically is dictating how you should be allocating cost to your government contracts and to your other contracts as well. And then there's various part 42 is administrative, 44 has to do with subcontracting, 45 has to do with property. So I just threw some of these. It's not even all the regulations you have to do, but you really need to know someone who understands how all these things fit together. That's where we came up with our theme, solving the puzzle of government contracting. We help companies put that together, understand where they need to be from where they are, so that they can succeed in the government contracting arena.
Gotcha. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it is. That's why I've been doing this for 38 years. I do not develop this expertise overnight.
I understand then what you say at the beginning, which is that when you get into government contracting, it's not the same. Your regular CPA, I doubt that they know this information.
No, I would say it's kind of like if you handed a CPA who does not do taxes a complicated tax return, and they have to learn everything from scratch. It doesn't mean that they aren't good accountants.
No, I got it.
But they have all those things. It's knowing the forms they have to fill out, knowing the laws behind those particular forms, and how what's supposed to go on each particular line. That's something that you can only learn over a period of time. And it becomes very important that you find somebody that actually understands it. Because, I have examples. In fact, I'm working with someone right now where if they had gotten better accounting advice, they could have solved an issue that has now led to an administrative court appearance that they have to go in the Armed Services Board of Contract Appeals. And they're really, and they're actually in negotiation with the government after filing because of things that happened to them before that, because their own accountants didn't understand what the process was. So with the government, it's not just doing it right, but also knowing what the process is on the government side. And that's where the Federal Acquisition Regulation is. It's a guide not only for contractors and what they're supposed to do, it's really a guide for the government as to what they're supposed to be doing. So you have to have someone who understands what the government's supposed to be doing and hold them accountable for what they're supposed to do. Yeah.
Interesting. I guess you can say that will be a liability for somebody to move into that arena without getting proper advice and consulting. Would you say?
Yeah, I think a lot of people do it though. They get into government contracting, and the people who tend to do that tend to be technical. And so one of the things that's unique about your government agencies is that they hold the technical on the same level as they hold all the administrative and accounting requirements. So, if you end up violating these administrative and accounting requirements that you have under your particular contracts, that can prevent you from getting future government contracts, no matter how good your product or service is. So you might be providing some extremely valuable information to the government. You still have to meet all these administrative and accounting requirements. And they're all related to each other. It's not like they're unrelated. The government actually wasn't trying to impose huge burdens on companies what they were trying to do is make sure that the burdens that they placed on the government contracts made sense for both the government and the contractor. But it's not one size fits all. So you need somebody who even understands that how do the regulations apply to different industries, the different types. It applies differently to a manufacturer than to a services organization.
True.
So you have those nuances. You have to have somebody who really understands that, so that you can get the right advice and do the right things. And your goal is to comply and be profitable.
Very good. Very good. I've been to several government contracting meetings. One of the things that came up is the fact that networking is just as important in that arena. Can you say a bit about it?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I think one of the big mistakes people do, especially when they get somebody coming to them, I can get you on the GSA schedule. Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, the GSA schedule is just that. It's just the schedule. It doesn't really get you any work. The way you get the work is to do your networking. You still have to meet with the agencies, the people within the agencies. For the small businesses, they're small business advocates. You need to find out who that is. First of all, you need to do some research. Find out which agencies use what you actually sell. So then you go to those agencies and approach them, find out where they are in terms of potential awards that they might make to you, or also find out who the prime contractors are that they may be dealing with, who may need your services. But you have to network with prime contractors as well as the government itself. And there's a lot of networking that needs to be done, because you really need to find people that you can team with, especially for small businesses. Teaming is extremely important, either with other small businesses or with other large businesses. So that takes a lot of networking, and you need to be known, because people do not want to team with people they don't know.
Never heard of.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Well, you have attended our breakfast event. Why don't you tell the audience your experience at the breakfast event?
Oh, the breakfast event is fantastic. I think one of the things that I enjoy about it the most is that you always have a presentation, which is valuable to us. They're very diverse, but I get to meet people who are working with government contractors. I get to meet people who are in commercial fields, a lot of business-to-business types of organizations, and also business to consumer and business to government. So it's just very interesting. We meet a lot of people, and the way you have it set up, you have that the ability at the end to meet anyone who's new, at the end of the meeting, which is really good. So you find out a lot of people. And a lot of times you go to network and you kind of get stuck in a corner, especially when it's crowded, and you don't really meet all the people. And this way, at least you get to meet everybody that's pretty much in the room. So I really always enjoy that.
How about the expo? Your experience at the expo?
Oh, the expo that I actually it's a great experience. One, there's a lot of camaraderie among the people who are exhibiting, which I really like. But you have people come through and they will come to your table and find out, and you see what you do. Even though what we do, and I have another business too, but what we do is consulting. There's a lot of businesses that are in there, so we get a lot of connections. It's always interesting how many connections I can make in that meeting in that one day.
Very good, very good. Yeah. Just so you're not a mystery, we host a monthly breakfast club in Fairfax. You can see the schedule on our website, which is you can check our website, which is blnbc.com. As for the expo, the next one is on May 22nd. Charles always exhibit at our expo. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So we still have some exhibitors and sponsorships available. So feel free to go to our website, which is ultbizexpo.com. ultbizexpo.com. Very good. Now, Charles, I want you to, what would be the last words that you could communicate to our audience regarding the government contracting arena in general?
Well, this is a very simple thing, and it's something you've heard many times under different circumstances, but an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And basically, there was a commercial a long time ago for an oil filter, and it said, "Pay me now or pay me later." And,
but either way, you're going to pay.
But when you did it early, it was not expensive. But if you had to repair your engine, it was going to be very expensive, and that was the point. That's the type of thing you have with government. You got to make sure that your company is operating smoothly, and you want to get rid of those little things that can actually be very detrimental to your company.
Okay, very good. Yeah, government contracting, definitely. It's important where we live here, yes, in this arena, because the government is nearby. So that's definitely something you want to If the business is fit with business, then you should definitely go into that. But I guess what you're saying is know before you go, is what I'm hearing?
Yes, yeah. Make sure that you get your ducks all lined up in a row. The one thing with the government is you want to make sure you're crossing all your T's and dotting all your I's. You have to be very concerned about that. And it's not that hard to do when you know what you're supposed to be doing. But there's a lot of people out there who claim that they do understand it when they really don't. So you really want to find there's a good community of people within the Washington, D.C. area that really understand government contracting. You need to find one of them.
Okay. Well, folks, you're looking at one of them.
Yes.
You can see Charles' website there on the screen, so feel free to contact him. Absolutely. Most of us are involved in the private sector. Private sector is different from the government. In private sector, I say you can get away with things. There is no, it's just between you and the person you're providing service to.
Right.
Whereas in the government, it is between you, the government, and the law.
Yes.
So if you can deliver a service that may or may not be up to par, but if in the process you do violate the laws of the land, then you end up in trouble.
Yes. And one of the things that you always have to understand in government contracts, they're very, very strict about the way they perform government contracts, staying within scope. The one thing you always have on the commercial side is, if I need to change the scope, I talk to the person who hired me and I say, we need to do X instead of Y, and you come to an agreement very easily. A lot of times the people who understand that are not the people who make that decision in the government, because it's a very formal process.
Gotcha. That's why we invited Charles, so to get an insight into the government contracting arena is definitely another beast. But now you have the information, you can deal with it or you can contact him. Thank you very much for tuning. Looking forward to seeing you. Check out show on Tuesday night, Wednesday night after midnight, but also Saturday at 2 o'clock. Have a good night. Looking forward to seeing you next time. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
This program was brought to you by Organo Gold. Organo Gold is a health and wellness company that provides healthy coffees, teas, and chocolate. All one has to do is consume the available coffee, teas, chocolate, and other products to get all the available benefits. One can also share these products with others to help them improve their health as well.